So welcome everyone. Happy Sunday. Today's topic is self-love and self-acceptance as the path of self-actualization. And my premise today is that it's not until we come to love and accept who we are, all of who we are, that we can fully self-actualize. Last week we spoke about this path of acceptance and of non-resistance and non-judgment generally in our lives as the keys to the kingdom. And that through this path of opening and allowing our lives and the energy of our lives to come to us and through us and opening and saying yes, our lives change and transform, and we connect to our spiritual center. And this kingdom that in the Bible is talked about as the kingdom of heaven, which is really the life of self-actualization, of our connection to our abundance, our connection to universal intelligence, our connection to our source, whatever metaphor you'd like to use, comes to us through accepting and allowing. And we talked a lot about how our lives change and grow as a result of this acceptance and allowing of our life and the energy of our life to come to us, to come through us, to allow ourselves to be healed and triggered by our lives. And that we come to trust that this process is one that is for us and expanding our lives. And we talked about how resistance is a form of self-protection. And the origins of our resistance to life and to ourselves come from our protections against the painful and uncomfortable feelings of our lives now, and this protective armor that we put on really began in our childhoods. 2 weeks ago, we spoke more specifically about self-love, self-care, and self-acceptance as a path of joy. And we spoke about the origins of this lack of self-love and lack of self-care and lack of self-acceptance being these protection mechanisms from our childhood. And we talked about the stories of our childhood that began when we didn't get the love we needed, we didn't get the attention we needed, we weren't heard and seen for all of who we are. Somehow our voice was not honored, or was repressed, or our needs were not met, for whatever reason. Whether our parents were physically present or not, emotionally present or not, many of us had challenging childhoods. And from these challenging childhoods, we learned that something about us was not acceptable. And so we developed a belief that something was wrong with us, that we were unworthy, that we were unlovable, that we were not good enough. And part of that story came from a protection mechanism because the feelings that were generated in our childhoods were too scary to be felt. It was too scary to think that our parents were just flawed human beings doing the best they could. Too scary to think that things just happen. And sometimes things don't go well, and sometimes people get divorced, or people die, or people are split up and not available to us. So the difficulty with a young child who does not yet have the consciousness to really understand and accept a world that is not perfect and parents that are not perfect results in a child believing that it's their fault. That whatever happens, whether it's parents getting divorced or people going away or people splitting up or people getting sick or passing away, we start to believe that it's our fault. which is actually safer and less scary than believing that the world is so imperfect, that our parents might not be perfect. And so we create a story to protect ourselves from terror and fear that is too much to bear. And so these energy patterns, as we've talked a lot about, these samskaras get repressed in our bodies, and they become a source of a story that we make true for our lives, and become a point of attraction towards experiences and people that are being attracted to the same vibrational frequency of these repressed feelings. And so these repressed feelings create a life of a mirror for these feelings of unworthiness. And so we talked about what happens as a result of that is that if we are not worthy of our parents' love, or we are not worthy of the attention of our caregivers, if we are somehow unlovable, if we are somehow not good enough, then we are not good enough for ourselves to love ourselves. We are not worthy of our own self-love. We are not worthy of our own self-care. We are not worthy of our own self-acceptance. And so what starts to happen in the first movement of that is that if we are not accepting and loving of ourselves, we are not accepting of the feelings that want to come to us and through us in our lives. And so we start to disconnect, which is the same movement that started this whole structure, disconnecting from feelings that were too overwhelming. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of disconnecting from painful feelings, because now we judge ourselves harshly. Now we're not worthy of loving self-acceptance. And so any feeling that wants to come up is also not worthy of being accepted. And so we repress our feelings. And we develop a habit pattern of resisting what wants to come up for us. And so what happens from that is that we not only are not feeling our feelings, bless you, like a child, and it's just reminding everyone how a healthy young child, a fully functioning organism, allows and embraces and expresses their feelings continuously. You've seen children in a park. They fall, they skin their knee, they cry. They're laughing with their friends 5 minutes later. They're yelling and screaming over a truck or a toy that their friend took. And then they're back to having fun again. And so it's a continuous cycle of allowing and accepting what's coming up for them. And so once we make this primal split, which is one of the things my teacher Don talks about, we split from not only our feelings, but we split from our spiritual center, which is what we are all been talking about trying to be connected to, which is this kingdom of heaven, which is this feeling of connection to not only all of life, but also of universal intelligence, of the guidance and the GPS that we're given if we're really listening within, of the creative flow in our lives. And so we're repressing our feelings, and then we become disconnected from our centers, and then we're disconnected from our guidance. All because we're judging ourselves. We are not accepting ourselves for who we are, and we're not accepting the feelings and the energy of life that wants to come up through us, and the feelings that life is generating us. And so we're also resisting any healing that life is wanting to bring to us. We're resisting the healing journey of allowing ourselves to be triggered, feeling our feelings, releasing them, and so no longer having that buried habit pattern, that buried energy pattern in our bodies, changing our vibrational frequency and then attracting new experiences into our lives. All of that is resisted, and so we get stuck. And so we're not loving and accepting ourselves, and we're not connecting to our spiritual centers, and we're not hearing our guidance, and we're not healing naturally. And so what we do is next is we go looking on the outside for our good, for our love, for our acceptance. And we start to go to our caretakers as children, and we start performing for love and approval and acceptance. And we start to learn that if we behave a certain way, if we perform a certain way, then we'll get the attention and the love that we need. And so we start to develop patterns of behavior and roles of attention seeking, of approval seeking. And sometimes it manifests as being a super good boy or girl. Sometimes it manifests as being the bad boy or girl, also attention getting. And then the next movement from that is that we look to relationships to replace the lack of self-love that we feel. And so we start to look for people on the outside to make us feel good about ourselves, first as general people in our lives, and then as intimate partners in our lives. And so we move into codependent relationship, where we're not loving ourselves and coming from wholeness, and we're seeking someone on the outside to make us feel whole and happy and complete. We're seeking someone on the outside to make us feel the self-esteem that we've never felt, to help us heal this inferiority complex, this I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. And so we go out into the world seeking approval, we go out into the world seeking love, and we go out into the world seeking positive feedback, even in jobs or in any situation. It's all codependence. It's all, I need you on the outside to tell me I'm a good boy. I need a good grade in school. I need to do well in my job. I need to get approval of other people. I need to be loved by one person who will make me feel better about myself, who will make me feel finally loved and lovable. All because we are not allowing and accepting our own feelings to come up. We're not loving ourselves. We're judging ourselves as wrong. Because we thought from the very beginning that because things happened in our lives and we were not fully seen and appreciated and approved of, fully heard, there must be something wrong with us. And so our life starts to mirror this vibration, and we've talked a lot about vibration, and it's really important to understand that we are vibrational beings in a universe of energy, and that we vibrate at a frequency based on how much of universal energy we allow to come through us. And if we are holding dense, repressed energy patterns in our bodies, which are these limiting beliefs and these fears and these unfinished energy patterns in our bodies, those lower our vibration. They close our channel for universal intelligence, for energy, for abundance to come through our channel. They get closed because we become dense, and we become heavy and weighted down with baggage, emotional baggage. And this density that is living in our bodies gets mirrored in our lives. And so we are vibrating at a lower frequency than a fully healthy organism who is allowing and expressing and releasing their feelings, opening up to the energy of the universe, the energy of their life coming through them. We're holding back, we're resisting, we're not feeling, and this energy gets stuck and it becomes dense. And then we attract experiences in our lives, which is a good thing, which is the healing journey, that are meant to trigger those experiences because they're they're meant to trigger those repressed energy patterns because they are a vibrational match for those energy patterns. But if we don't open up and allow our lives to heal us by triggering those feelings and accepting and loving ourselves enough to allow those feelings to come up, to be fully felt, to be embraced and then released, and so thereby we are healed, we just collect more density in our bodies. We resist. We don't allow ourselves to be healed and changed. We don't allow ourselves to feel our feelings. And so it's just like we're picking up more baggage, more weight, more density in our bodies and in our consciousness that weighs us down. And our lives become a mirror of that. And so we don't have the relationship we want. We're not making the kind of money or abundance we want. We're not feeling fully expressed in our careers. We're not having the lives that we want because we're carrying all of this. And so we talked about 2 weeks ago starting to try to change our vibration through self-care, which is very important. And we talked about the notion of the taking of time, which is what we're doing here today, and the notion of Sabbath that also comes from the Bible, that both the Old and New Testaments, the notion that God rested on the seventh day. But what we know that to mean in terms of a metaphysical interpretation is that not so much about God or the universe resting, but more prescription for healthy living for us, that we should take rest and we should take time for self-love and self-care in order to live a more self-actualized life, in order to have a fuller life. And so the importance of taking time in the morning, we talked about, for sitting quietly and really feeling your feelings. The importance of taking time on a Sunday to come to a spiritual talk, to make love to your partner, to eat great food, to spend time with your family, to not engage in commerce. And we talked about how it's become not engaging in electronics, and clearly that wasn't written in the Bible because they didn't have electronics then. But no sorts of doing and making things happen. It's more of an energy of being and allowing and taking care of ourselves and nurturing ourselves, which are things that we don't naturally feel we deserve. Those of us who carry around this lack of self-worth, this unworthiness, this I'm not good enough. So we start to try to live in a way that raises our vibration by honoring and allowing our feelings and sitting quietly, doing yoga or any form of movement, taking a walk in the park, reading spiritual books or poetry or anything that inspires us. And we try to start to take time every day of our lives, sometimes in the morning or right before we go to bed. And it's the taking of time that starts to change our energy and vibration. And so what I wanted to talk about today was, the other thing that we talked about was engaging in inner child work and making play dates with our inner child. And we talked about trying to start to connect with our inner child and writing letters with the right hand and trying to write letters back from the child with our left hand, or if you're a lefty, vice versa. And starting to develop a dialogue with our inner child, and from that dialogue, starting to listen and create play dates to spend time with our inner child, honoring what the child wants to do, whether it's eating an ice cream cone or riding a bicycle or playing on the monkey bars or jumping on a trampoline, or like my teacher August, her inner child wanted her to take off all the buttons of her jackets and resew mismatched buttons on her jackets, and so she indulged that, and that was a form of self-care. All of this honoring of this inner child, of ourselves, and loving and caring for ourselves. And so when we move more into this inner child work and we start this journey of self-discovery, what we start to see is that part of our coping mechanism for our childhoods was that we adapted to the feedback from our lives, to the feedback from our parents. And so we started to learn what were the good and approved of and acceptable qualities that we had. And we also started to learn very clearly what the disapproved of qualities were. What the qualities were that made our parents anxious or uncomfortable, or our caretakers, or our family, or our society. Our differentness, our ugly duckling quality. And what we start to see is that we start to repress parts of ourselves. In our performing for approval and acceptance and love, we start to repress parts of ourselves that we don't feel are acceptable to others in our lives. And so those parts of ourselves become lost. They become lost in our history. They become buried. They're the lost parts of ourselves, and they hold the key for our happiness and our self-actualization. So we go through our lives, and we are missing parts of ourselves. We are therefore not whole, of course, and we are wondering why we're not feeling whole. And we're not feeling whole because all of us was not loved and accepted. All of us was not appreciated. And so a part of ourselves was repressed. And so as we move through our lives, we feel incomplete, and we look to the outside world to complete us because of what we've buried in ourselves. There's a great story, an ancient story, about how when we're born, the mirror of ourselves gets shattered into a million pieces. And our understanding of ourselves, of our wholeness, gets shattered and dispersed into the world when we're born. And that the process of moving through our lives is the process of rediscovering and of taking back those lost parts of ourselves and bringing them back home. And in some cases, those lost parts of ourselves are qualities that are challenging. There are loudness, or our quietness, or our shyness, or our obnoxiousness, or things that were labeled as negative. There are fears. There are or givenness to complain. There are insecurities. But they need to be owned and loved because they're a part of ourselves, and without them, we're not whole. And this is our shadow. All that we have sent underground because it was not acceptable to us, to our families, to the world around us. Our uniqueness, how we see the world in a very unique way that's different from anyone else, that might make other people uncomfortable. Our unique take on the world, our unique gift, is often one of the things that is lost as we repress that which is not fully accepted and understood. And this is, some people call this the lost gold of the shadow. Our greatness, our uniqueness, our power, our amazing qualities are often also repressed, along with the more challenging, less fun qualities. And so we start to project these qualities out onto other people. And so instead of owning our greatness, owning our voice, owning our creativity, owning our power in a certain way, we project those qualities out to our heroes, to our teachers, to our leaders, to the sports heroes, to people in history. Because we can't own them in ourselves, and so we project outward. Course in Miracles talks a lot about this disowning and projecting outward. And so we don't have our greatness that we're carrying. We don't have our unique gift, our unique vision of the world, which was not appreciated. And so we find others in our lives who will mirror that for us. Teachers, leaders, people for us to worship. In some cases, spiritual and religious leaders. We give away all of our... This is the source of many aspects of religion, where we give away our power and all of our magic to some spiritual leader instead of owning it in ourselves. We make them godlike instead of owning the godliness in ourselves. And in terms of the challenging qualities, we often will project those outward, and part of our codependent relationships wind up being relationships with people who are manifesting qualities in us that we rejected and need to love. And so this is what codependence is. For myself, this manifested as damsels in distress for much of my life. I would always find women who were needy, who were having a hard time in life, who needed to be rescued. And what I finally learned from that was that there was a part of myself that I had repressed that was needy, that needed to be rescued, that needed to be loved. That was not part of the acceptable qualities of myself, was not part of the strong man I had been trained to be, the good provider, the successful student, the successful businessman, the one who can take care of himself. There was no room for being lost and scared. There was no room for being in distress. There was no room for being unable to take care of myself. And so time after time, I projected those qualities out and tried to take care of those around me, of those people in my life, especially those partners in my life, that were embodying those qualities that were lost to me. And so what this great teacher, Panache Desai, says is that it's not until we fully embrace all of who we are that our lives start to change and we start to self-actualize. It's not until we take back all of the projections of the gifts and the strengths and the talents and the greatness that we project onto leaders and people we idolize, the projections onto the damsels in distress in our lives, of our insecurities, of our unworthiness, of our we're not good enough. It's not until we start to love what Jeff Foster talks about, all of the waves of the ocean. All of the waves of the ocean of our experience want to be loved and accepted and embraced. And as we start to love and accept and embrace those waves in our ocean of experience that were repressed, that changes our frequency. We bring the highest vibration of love to ourselves first, before we can bring that to the outside. We heal ourselves first by loving and accepting. And as we love and accept those qualities in ourselves that need to be healed, we allow our feelings to come up. We start to accept all of us. And so that stuckness that we talked about, of resistance to what we're feeling, to what life wants to trigger in us, that resistance to the healing journey starts to soften. We start to bring what the Buddhists call Maitri, which is loving kindness to ourselves first, unconditional friendliness to ourselves first. And so this resistance and self-judgment that causes our feelings to stay stuck, that keeps the world and the energy of the world and our experiences from coming into our bodies, triggering us, and releasing those samskaras that have been defining our lives, that energy starts to change. We start to allow our lives to heal us. We start to trust this moment as our perfect teacher in every moment of our lives and start to say yes, because we're loving and accepting this disowned parts of ourselves, the feelings that we're not worthy that wanted to come up but that we've been repressing since we were children, the unconsciousness living in our bodies. We start to say, yes, I love you. I love you, my unworthiness. I love you, my I'm too loudness. I love you, my unique vision of this world, my unique gifts. I love you, my power, which many of us have disowned as much as our challenged qualities. And so as we start to love and embrace and bring that vibration of love, our bodies and our vibrational frequency changes, and we allow life to heal us, and what's stuck and dense that we've talked about, the dense energy patterns stuck in our bodies start to release, and our lives start to expand. And it's all coming from this energy of loving and accepting every quality of who we are. And so we start to change our vibration, and then more comes into our lives. We reconnect to our spiritual centers. We can start to hear the voice, the still small voice, our connection to universal intelligence, our GPS. All of that starts to come up through us. And so we start to get to know ourselves a little bit. Because we lived our lives up to a certain point, and I know I lived my life up until my 40s, completely disconnected from who I really was. So much in performing mode that I could not discern what were my true callings. What did I want to do? What do I want to be? It was so much performing for approval. It was so much looking to the outside for acceptance that who I really was completely foreign to me. What I really wanted to be doing on a moment-to-moment basis, on a lifetime basis, on a calling basis. So in our loving and accepting of ourselves, we start this journey of self-discovery. We start to ask ourselves, once we're connected to our centers, what do you want to be doing? We start to connect to our inner child and listen. What do you have for me? What lost gold? What lost talents and gifts can I access from you that I buried with you so long ago? And we start to listen. And we start to mine our lives for what we call life symbols, for memories of defining moments in our lives where we shined, where we were amazing, where we felt amazing. And we start to open up to all of those great moments in our lives, and they start to rush in. And all those symbols of things that were important to us, of qualities that were important to us. And we start to look at our teachers and the people who we really idealize and idolize. And we start to find that we have those qualities, that we've been repressing them, we've been projecting them out, but they are part of who we are. We are just like our teachers. We are just like those leaders who we are so passionate about admiring. And we start to take the energy that we've been disowning back into ourselves. And we also start to take the energy of the unworthiness, of the insecurity, of the dysfunction, of the negative quote-unquote qualities of ourselves, and we bring that energy back into us, and we love that too, and our vibration changes. And then we are no longer projecting anything outward into the world that we're not owning in ourselves. And so we feel wholeness. And then we are vibrating at a frequency of wholeness. Even for the challenging and quote-unquote bad stuff, we're owning it, we're allowing it, we're conscious of it. And so our instrument, the pieces of our instrument, the mirror that we've pulled back in, becomes a beautiful flute, or a beautiful bass, or a beautiful piano. And so the music of the universe that wants to come through us specifically in our unique way can start to come through us. Because we're vibrating at the frequency of wholeness. We've taken in the lost parts of ourselves. We're honoring our gifts. We're honoring our opportunities. And only when we love and fully embrace these qualities in ourselves, all of who we are, can the universe really express through us. And only as we start to discover what our unique gifts and talents are, can the universe start to express. I have two brothers who are painters. I cannot draw at all. If I lived a life of trying to draw or paint, I'd be a miserable failure. Right? I just don't have that talent. But I have other talents. I share a talent with my father for writing, and one of the things that I mined from my life was that I was a good actor when I was young. But I never really wanted to become an actor. But what I realized was that ability to have presence and to speak to people on a stage. Well, what am I doing now? So I started to mine my life for what really I was uniquely suited to do. And we talk about this zone of genius. And about the idea of how do we start to look at what are our unique gifts? What do we love to do? What gives us the most joy? What makes the little boy or little girl living inside of us the most happy? What makes that little boy or little girl feel expressed? Because that little boy or little girl got stifled when they were very young. Their natural expression was on some level rejected. And so they've been disconnected from all of this that was meant to come through them. And you see people in the world who are connected, who were not stifled. And you see these amazing young kids singing on television, or you see a channel that has not been disconnected from its source, that has not been judged. You see people whose expression was never stifled, and those are the people who are expressing and doing amazing things. But many of us need to go through a life journey to get to that place, and that's been my journey. But it's the honoring and the loving of ourselves in the moment, being kind to ourselves, not judging ourselves. When we're looking in the mirror about we've gained a few pounds, trying to not be so harsh, that's one of mine. When we're thinking about pushing to do one more thing, to accomplish one more thing that day, but we are exhausted. To have the thought, you know what, I can do that tomorrow. I don't have to keep proving myself. I love myself already. And so the whole dynamic in your relationship with your life changes because you're no longer looking for your love outside yourself. So you're no longer proving yourself. And you're no longer giving yourself away to dysfunctional relationships, or giving yourself away to codependent relationships, or to jobs that don't suit you, because you're not needing the approval. And so you're not exhausting yourself, getting approval and performing, because you're already holding self-love. And so instead of doing that extra thing that you used to do that exhausted you, and this is one of my challenges, working so hard that I completely exhaust myself, you start to say, you know what, I'm worthy of rest. I'm worthy of play. I'm worthy of nurturing. I don't need to define myself by how this task that I'm going to do for my job that makes me feel like I'm approved of. I'm taking my power back. And I'm starting to look within about what are my gifts, what are my callings, what am I uniquely suited to do, what do I love to do, and I start to find those things and I start to do those things. And then the power of that connection to ourselves and self-love and that bringing together of our instrument starts to allow universal intelligence, abundance, supply to come to us and through us. Suddenly, 1,000 invisible hands come to our aid when we start to follow our passions. The universe programmed each of us differently with unique gifts, and many of us go through our whole lives never expressing those unique gifts, trying to be like everyone else. And those are the people who never become fully self-actualized, never fully express themselves, and therefore don't have the abundance, don't have the love, because it's all one energy that manifests in different forms. So this loving and allowing ourselves and accepting ourselves and discovering our passions and our callings and our purpose, or what Panache Desai calls our soul signature. What we are meant to do uniquely, not what we were doing to get our parents' approval, society's approval. What we are meant to do uniquely. And when we discover that, our instrument comes alive. And we express creativity and abundance comes into our lives, and we start to self-actualize.